Reverend K. George, Paul, my friend, and all of you assembled here, I'm sure, great love and respect for the late Metropolitan Paulos Gregorios. I'm going to use English as my predominant medium of communication for the present. Because I don't think there's anyone present here who finds it difficult to follow the language, though I am sure there's one person who cannot follow the letter. So the need preponderates towards a language that's not particularly native to us, though English has the status of the language. Since several very relevant things about Triveni have been already said, I can actually economize some time and not go into that area at all. Perhaps I should only place on record my great fortune in having been associated with Triveni for a while. Largely because we were both in Delhi. And also because he was a great man. Time doesn't allow me to go into details there also, but I'll mention only a couple of things. At least going by my experience in the capital city, I can say this without any fear of contradiction, that Triveni was more loved and had more followers in the non-Christian community than the Christian community. And that too in the intellectual circles. He was a rage in Delhi University. Some of my friends I discovered through Triveni, they're all non-Christian friends. He had that great personal, intellectual magnetism which hardly anyone could resist. But I must say this with some emphasis. Looking back, I realized that I came into proximity with Paulos Gregorios at a time when I was not ready for it. Now this is important for me to say. I was not ready to enter into the fullness of a possible relationship with a soul as great as Paulos Gregorios. My own spiritual development is a story in itself. It's not relevant here, therefore I will not. But I will only say this much, that looking back, I realized I was some kind of a fundamentalist at that time. And that restricted my ability to take in the fullness of the possibilities that situations and individuals offer. And this is a problem which all religious-minded people, irrespective of religious labels, need to address. What is meant to be a source of empowerment becomes a prison. Bridges become dividing walls. Light becomes darkness. But Triveni played a big role in making me aware of the horizons that I was missing. And one particular instance was, it was at 1995, I think, he was unwell. But I have not had a single occasion where he would say, I'm short on energy, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, we can't meet. He would take me to his bedroom, he would lie on his bed and talk. I wouldn't do that. He had that tremendous, irrepressible eagerness to communicate, to share, to give, to the last breath. He said, look, the University of Patiala has asked me to write a textbook on Sikhism. I was very keen to do it, so I accepted it, but now I realize I can't do it. Will you take on this project? I said, Triveni, I'm just not equal to the task. And I wasn't. I was not being falsely modest. He said, no, you can do it. It's not right for us to say, no, you take it. You're the only person who can do it. I did not. But it made me think, why should a university turn to a Christian bishop to write a textbook on Sikhism for a Sikh university? The other instance, and with that I'll close the biographical part. 1991, I was doing a documentary on HIV/AIDS. Those were the early days. And I got an offer of financial support from an NGO in the United Kingdom. They were very keen to produce a film, a documentary, the Indian context, and India was just moving into that huge tragedy. I decided to make it scientific as well as spiritual perspective. Therefore, the interviews with religious leaders were to be part of my script. And when I thought about who could be interviewed from the Christian community, obviously there was only one name, and that was Paulos Gregorios. And I had other names for other religions, and I approached each one of them, and the response was stereotypical. Every one of them asked me, what do we have to do with HIV/AIDS? This is something that doctors must talk about, not religious people. I went to Triveni, and I tell you, he gave the best response to that problem. And when that documentary was officially released in Delhi by the then Information Broadcasting Minister Ajay Kumar Panja, he specifically asked me about Triveni because it was so striking what he said. Anyway, so it doesn't have to be argued any further. Now what I want to do, I know that we have lost a bit of time, but I will take about 45 minutes. Is that all right? All right. In 45 minutes, I'll try and I'm a bit technology challenged, so you'll have to bear with me. All right, there we are. What I propose to do is to flag a few themes, issues, or concepts, or subjects, or whatever, which I believe are very central, or very basic to Triveni's architecture of thought, mainly to construct a platform for discussion. And I hope you participate in this process with that end in view. But here, I make a brief reference to, since Triveni was a scientist and I wasn't one. However, I'll make a reference to Galileo. In my notes, I have printed by mistake. Galileo's period is 1564 to 1648. It's not 15th century, he straddled the 16th and 17th century. Galileo said, you can understand only what you discover. Now, this is an insight of tremendous pedagogic application. You can understand only what you discover. The task of a lecturer, or one who gives the kind of talks that actually should be given to honor Paulos Gregorios, the task of a lecturer is to enable the participants to discover. not to listen. We need to discover. If you can recall your school days, college days, university days, without any doubt, what you even now remember would be the things that you discovered, if any. Otherwise, you draw a blank. So, when we say we don't understand, it's not always a reflection on the complexity of the ideas presented. It's actually an admission of one's ability or inability to discover what is being presented. It's because our education system does not train people in the art of discovering things. That's what we mean by learning by rote, which is an oppression. It happens at the highest levels of our academia. We are not allowing young minds to open up. We're denying them the delight of discovery, which I believe is a terrible disservice. And what Paulos Gregorios did all the time was not to overwhelm his audiences with the enormity of his ponderous wisdom or scholarship. I've listened to him on many occasions. Each time I listened to him, I would say to myself, I was almost there. I was there. But I did not quite know this. And I think that's the mark of a good teacher. So I plead with you to participate in this process in that spirit and with that discipline. Alright. Maybe one more thing by way of introduction and then I'll get on to some of the concepts. I'm very grateful to Father George for mentioning the multi-dimensional genius that Triveni was. All that is 100% correct. And I fully endorse this and I'm proud of it. But the question needs to be asked. Why is it that we have very few such instances to celebrate? Someone who integrated theology with philosophy, which actually was the norm when St. Augustine wrote it, which was the norm when, when St. Thomas Aquinas wrote his works. When did the divorce take place and why? Someone who integrated spirituality with scholarship. Why doesn't it happen anymore? And what happens when these things are separated? What we see today. It has created God-men and God-women. The merchants and peddlers of superstition who thrive on the gullibility and the foolishness of people were actually ambassadors of darkness. That's what we are seeing all the time. So therefore, there's no question of the contemporary, the relevance of the model, the role model that Paulos Gregorios presented. But the thing to worry about is that it looks as though it's almost stopped, except for people like Father George. I'm one of his admirers. But we need to make sure, as part of the work of the chair, that this culture itself is propagated. There's no commemoration of a great man without making his model impact. A chair should not become a monument, it must become a movement that transforms people. Alright. Now, let me flag a few issues. Father George mentioned Triveni's great felicity with languages. At least, I know that at least he was quite competent with 8 languages that I know of, and probably many more. Why should we pay attention to this? Well, it's very simple. If you look at your phones, there's something called SMS, right? SMS is a wonderful device to kill languages. You know, it breeds almost shameless impatience with language. Someone has to do a bit of research on what has happened to the language on account of the internet and particularly the cell phone. Today, it's not that we don't pay attention to languages, it's that even the one language we have is a burden for us. Now, language is so important for the development of the human. Anyone who is familiar with any scriptural tradition, whether it is Hindu, Christian, Muslim, whatever, will know the importance of languages. Of course, it has a negative implication in the sense that certain religions got equated or in a radical way associated with certain languages, and those languages were given some kind of cultic importance. Oh, that's a distortion. That's not the point I'm making. To take an example, the biblical account begins with the Tower of Babel, which accounts for the multiplicity of languages, which unfortunately in that context may seem as a problem. Now it's a great source of enrichment. Because without the Tower of Babel, you cannot have the Pentecost. The healing and restoration and the reconciliation of languages. And in the meanwhile, they come having gathered a whole world of historical experiences and insights. If there are parents, young parents listening to me today, you must pay special attention to the development of the linguistic faculties of your children, because in this age of so-called science and technology, people tend to belittle the importance of language. And it's scientifically now proved that languages are so basic to your development as human beings. I believe that Tirumeni's felicity with several languages, including Sanskrit, that was one of his strengths, was because of his passion to know things in their fullness. Now, that's a spiritual aspect of his scholarship. Now, spirituality is about wholeness. The historical interpretation of the spirit, which you see almost embedded in Arnold Toynbee, a historian's approach to religion. And several writers in that period the idea of the spirit is that we need something that connects the broken, the fragmented, the scattered pieces of life and of the universe. In mystical traditions, you have mystical and pantheistic traditions. You have the idea of something permeating the whole of the created order. The same thing. It's very much there in the Hindu philosophical understanding of reality. There is something, Brahman, within which everything coheres. What is the other alternative? Eliot would say, son of man, you know only a heap of broken images. Now Now this brokenness has become the pride of the modern culture. You call it by a variety of dignified names. For example, specialization is one, division of labor is another one, so on and so forth. Somehow we are prevented from experiencing anything in its fullness or wholeness. And wholeness is healing. In spiritual thought, there is a distinction between healing and curing. സൗഖ്യമാകുന്നതും രോഗശാന്തി വരുന്നതും തമ്മിൽ വ്യത്യാസമുണ്ട്. ആശുപത്രിയിൽ രോഗശാന്തി നടക്കും, സൗഖ്യമുണ്ടാകണമെന്നില്ല. Unless a spiritually enlightened doctor is at work there. We can discuss this if you want later. So, what education also bypasses, what religion bypasses, what I believe also science too bypasses, is this great challenge, this great existential spiritual challenge of experiencing the fullness of life. And that is the quintessential spiritual goal. Jesus says, I have come that they may have life, and life in all its fullness. Saint Paul says, we now see in part, ഇപ്പോൾ നാം അല്പമായി കാണുന്നു, പൂർണ്ണമായത് വരും. അപ്പോൾ അല്പമായത് മാറിപ്പോകും. The universal human tragedy, the seed of our oppression, our insecurities, inadequacies, our misery, what John Keats calls the giant agony of the world, is that we are all entrapped in the blood. അല്പമായതിൽ നാം തളച്ചു കിടക്കപ്പെടുകയാണ്. കാരാഗ്രഹം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അംശം എന്നാണ് അർത്ഥം. A prison is also a part of a country, but it's a limited part of a country. You can be free inside the prison, but it is such freedom as the prison allows. ഒരു തടവിൽ കിടക്കുമ്പോഴും തടവിനകത്തുള്ള സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യമുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ അത് സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യമല്ല, സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യത്തിന്റെ വേഗോലമാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ ആധുനിക യുഗത്തിൽ നുറുക്കപ്പെട്ട ഈ ലോകത്തിൽ മനുഷ്യൻ കഷണങ്ങളിൽ പരിമിതപ്പെട്ട് കിടക്കുമ്പോൾ എല്ലാ അനുഭവങ്ങളുടെയും ആശയങ്ങളുടെയും പൂർണ്ണതയെ അനുഭവിക്കുവാൻ മനുഷ്യന് കഴിയാതിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു വലിയ പരാധീനതയുടെ, പട്ടിണിയുടെ ഒരു അവസ്ഥയോടാണ് തിരുമേനി പ്രതികരിച്ചത്. Tirumenis life was a creative spiritual protest against the imprisonment of the human in the partial. It was a relentless quest to experience the wholeness of everything. See, there's a difference between mastering Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy, 8, 9 languages, science, social sciences, whatever, theology, mastering all of that in order to impress people, to be active and welcome in the conference circuits of the world, which is a scandal in itself. And doing all that imperceptibly as part of one's spiritual commitment to experience the fullness of everything and to transmit a taste of that bliss to others. There's a whole world of difference between the two. And I know many people in the university circles and otherwise who are also great scholars, but they did not have Tirumeni's personal magnetism. I believe the difference lies here. Time doesn't allow me to develop this thought any further than I have, so I'll be more. So far I was commenting on Tirumeni's felicity with languages and why he went into it. Or let me say maybe this much more. If you have grappled with spiritual concepts, you will know how inadequate language is. See, the problem is this: every language is an embodiment of the part. There is no language in the world, not even English, which is supposed to be the most developed language. Malayalam is equally developed. One of the most complex languages you can ever imagine. There is no language in the world which can actually capture the fullness of these ideas, experiences, and possibilities. Therefore, if you really want to experience the fullness of a concept, then you need to look at it from different angles and different lenses of linguistic geniuses. You remember the ancient Indian story of 5 blind people going to see the elephant? Depending on which part of the elephant's body they touched, they had their idea of the elephant. Patunagam, Moramagam, Pambaga, so, അങ്ങനെയിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു സാഹചര്യത്തിൽ ആന എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സങ്കല്പം അതിന്റെ പൂർണ്ണതയോട് അടുത്തെങ്കിലും വരണമെങ്കിൽ ഈ 5 ആളുകളുടെ അനുഭവം ഒന്നിച്ചു ചേർത്ത് ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഒരു ചിത്രത്തിന് മാത്രമേ ആ സങ്കല്പത്തെ സമീപിക്കുവാൻ സാധിക്കൂ. As St. Paul says, we are still trapped in the partial. There's no question. But within the partial, we can still move towards the completeness at least of the part. Rather than being partial about the partial, we can be holistic about the part. That's all that's possible. But അങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു വലിയ സംരംഭം ആജീവനാന്ത തപസ്യ തിരുമേനി നടത്തി എന്നതിന്റെ ദൃക്സാക്ഷിയാണ്. അതെന്നെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം വളരെ വളരെ പ്രചോദനം നൽകുകയും ഞാൻ വാസ്തവത്തിൽ ഇന്നായി തീരുവാൻ തക്കവണ്ണം എൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ വളരെയധികം ഒരു പ്രോത്സാഹനം നൽകിയ ചില അനുഭവങ്ങളിൽ ഒന്നാണ് തിരുമേനിയുമായിട്ടുള്ള എൻ്റെ അടുപ്പം. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഈ കാര്യങ്ങൾ വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് അല്പമെങ്കിലും വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നതോട് പറയാൻ സാധിക്കും. അപ്പോൾ ഇത് ഒരു കാര്യം. രണ്ടാമതായിട്ട് പറയാനുള്ളത് സമയം ഉപയോഗിക്കണേ. ഞാൻ മറന്നു. അച്ഛനെ നിയന്ത്രിച്ചില്ലെങ്കിൽ ആളുകൾ ബോധം കിട്ടുകയും. രണ്ടാമതായിട്ട് തിരുമേനിക്ക് ഒരു വലിയ അഡ്വാൻറ്റേജ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. തിരുമേനിയുടെ ഗ്രേറ്റ് അഡ്വാൻറ്റേജ്. That advantage was the advantage of a great tradition. ഇത് പലപ്പോഴും മറന്നു പോകുന്ന കാര്യം. I can't think of Paulos Gregorios Tirumeni without the Orthodox tradition. I don't know how far the Orthodox members themselves realize this. See, what in the modern age we fail to recognize, and I need to explain this to you, so bear with me a little bit. What we today, because of our inheritance, or the residual after effects of modernity, we suffer from is a certain prejudice against traditions. One of my favorite authors is the German academic philosopher, was a close associate with Martin Heidegger. His name is Hannah Arendt. One of the most stimulating, a Jew. Who else? a wonderful, well-researched article in the 40s titled, "What is Authority?" What is authority? It's about 40 pages, a very dense material. So she says, one of the features of modernity is the death of authority. Nobody today is willing to accept anybody's authority. Because we see the rejection of authority as a measure of personal liberty. I am sufficient in myself. What Samuel Huntington in The Clash of Civilizations calls the self-accentuating individual. The autonomous, self-accentuating individual. I am complete in myself. I don't need you. I've got all the means necessary for my own happy life. Get lost. So it's actually an illusion, a dangerous delusion created by modernity. So she says, the hallmark of modernity is its destructive antipathy towards three things. Three things. Religion, tradition, authority. She calls it a triad. A set of three. ഈ മൂന്ന് കാര്യങ്ങളോട് ആധുനികത്വം വളരെയധികം ശത്രുത്വം മനഃപൂർവ്വം സൃഷ്ടിച്ചുണ്ടാക്കി. So that's the reason why I have to explain this to you. Paulos Gregorios was deeply rooted in and continually nourished by that profound tradition called the Orthodox tradition. My own favorite field of domain of fiction is Russian fiction. And I know the profundity of the Russian Orthodox tradition through writers like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Also, of course, Rebel Day is such a different story. Now, T.S. Eliot wrote a prose piece, an essay, titled Tradition and Individual Talent. He says that every individual needs a tradition within which to grow. എല്ലാ വ്യക്തികൾക്കും വളരുവാനും വെളിച്ചം കാണുവാനും ഒരു ഭവനം പോലെ ഒരു പാരമ്പര്യം ആവശ്യമാണ്. A tradition which does not nurture creative people, live, dynamic people, is a dead tradition. It's not worth it. It is petrified, it's fossilized, it's gone. The only proof that a tradition is still living is that it nurses, fosters, creates, releases, unleashes great individuals, individual talent. On the other hand, every tradition needs individuals who can give to these traditions a new lease of life and to reincarnate these traditions in fresh hope and vitality. ഇത് രണ്ടും സംഭവിക്കണം. അത് സംഭവിച്ചു. പക്ഷെ അത് സംഭവിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേ ഇരിക്കണം. സംശയമാണ്. That's where the church also has to come up and take and face this challenge. So the importance of a tradition. I know time is short, so I'm going to sort of skip a lot of things. Now let me come to what I consider to be a very, very key area, very, very critically important aspect of the Metropolitan's vision his philosophical vision, his spiritual vision. In fact, I believe that this is the point of convergence between his philosophy and his spirituality. Now, this is entirely my opinion. You don't have to take it. You can question it, reject it, no problem. But this, I am totally convinced. This is actually the heart of the matter. So that's why I'm going to take it up. And I may have to spend a little time on this so that I can explain that. Father George made a reference to that most unforgettable speech the Metropolitan made in the year 1993, 100 years after the Chicago Parliament of World Religions, on the 100th anniversary. And the Metropolitan characteristically commenced that speech with a speech by quoting the Vedic prayer, Sattoma Satkame. If you look at the structure of that prayer, of which Trimeni was very fond, it is certainly a longing. It captures the longing of our species. What is the nature, what is the essence, what is the genius of that longing? I'm just positing that. I'm not going to comment any further on this, but I'll come back to it hopefully after a while. Now let me put forward exactly what I want to say in one sentence, and then I'll take it up from there. In this prayer, there is a longing to be led from the manifest to the unmanifest. Mrityoma Amradam Gamaya is sometimes translated as from death to immortality. But the correct translation would be from the manifest to whatever is manifested in time will perish. There's no question about it. Exist in time, you will perish in time. So that's where this confusion comes. So, from the manifest, lead us to the unmanifest. Alright? It's very simple enough to fix in our thought. Two possibilities, two domains, two spheres. One is the manifest, the other is the not yet manifested, the unmanifest. Now, I'm not an expert on Indian philosophy. I know nothing about Indian philosophy, unfortunately. I intend to study Indian philosophy. But this much I know, that the three pramanas, and Triveni speaks at length about these things, and he's my main source in what I'm going to say now. The three pramanas of understanding reality from within the Indian tradition, there's a lot of very interesting similarity between the Indian system and the Greek philosophical system as a subject in itself. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama. Pratyaksha is the manifest, that which you can see, that which exists in time and space, that which, if you like, borrowing Western terminology, that which can be subjected to empirical verification. Anumana is the process of deciphering, decoding, unraveling the projection, and it happens to the individual, right? Or let me use the categories introduced by modern Western philosophy. Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre. Being in itself as against being for itself. Triveni uses a Malayalam word to translate being in itself, and that word is unma. Now, I'm not etymologically familiar with the scope and reach of that word, but I'm sure that if Triveni uses that word, has done his homework thoroughly. Unma. That is, all of the created order together constitute being in itself. But being for itself is the consciousness of the individual which responds to this. Verita unma. Unmayil ninnu verita unma. So, there is on this level the manifest, then there is the individual, anumana, then there is another dimension, agama, that which is yet to come. There is a passage in Martin Heidegger where he says, between the never again of the departing gods and the not yet of the gods that still haven't come, the human soul is stuck in the dark night of the soul. ഇനി ഒരിക്കലും ഞാൻ മടങ്ങി വരികയില്ല എന്ന് മുറവിളിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് കടന്നുപോയ ദൈവങ്ങളുടെയും എനിക്കിപ്പോൾ വരാൻ ധൈര്യമില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് മടിച്ചു നിൽക്കുന്ന ദൈവങ്ങളുടെയും ഇടയ്ക്കുള്ള ആ അകലത്തിൽ ആത്മാവിന്റെ അവസാനിക്കാത്ത രാത്രിയിൽ മനുഷ്യ ആത്മാക്കൾ, മനുഷ്യ ജീവിതങ്ങൾ തകർന്നുപോയി. Alright. So there are these three dimensions, right? If that is registered, is it? Yes. There is a manifest, there is the individual consciousness, then there is that which is still not. But in Christian theology and the biblical vision, the order is the other way around. The unmanifest, creatio ex nihilo. Creation out of nothing. The starting point is the unmanifest. Then the creation of man. Who responds to it? So from the unmanifest manifestation, as part of the manifestation, human beings with consciousness who have the very special ability to mediate between the unmanifest and the manifest. And that is the uniqueness of the human. മനുഷ്യന്റെ ആ പ്രത്യേകതയുടെ മൂലക്കല്ല് ഇവിടെയാണ് കിടക്കുന്നത്. എന്താണ്? പ്രത്യക്ഷമായതും അപ്രത്യക്ഷമാകാത്തതും ആകാവുന്നതും ആയിട്ടുള്ള ബന്ധത്തിന്റെ മധ്യത്തിൽ അതിന്റെ ഇടനിലക്കാരനാണ് മനുഷ്യൻ. Is the mediator between the unmanifest and the manifest. About now, manifest, unmanifest, these are philosophical terms. Because we will get confused. So I'm going to use a very familiar set of terms. They're not good enough, but I'm going to use it for the sake of convenience. And is invisible and invisible, or seen or unseen. These are all very, very limited categories, but we'll use those words. Now, take creativity. Take creativity. Sargarmala. What's happening? A particular human consciousness with that rare gift of creativity takes up a particular medium which is manifest, but within the manifest there is something that has to be made manifest. മൈക്കലാഞ്ചലോ പറഞ്ഞു, ഞാൻ ഒരു സുന്ദര രൂപത്തെ സൃഷ്ടിക്കുകയല്ല, ഈ കല്ലിൽ മറഞ്ഞു കിടക്കുന്ന സുന്ദര രൂപത്തെ ഒന്ന് സ്വതന്ത്രമാക്കുക, ലിബറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുക. I'm only setting free, I'm only liberating the image of beauty that is lying hidden, unmanifest in this block of stone or this wood or brass or whatever medium. അപ്പോ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഡയമെൻഷൻ ഇല്ല എങ്കിൽ, if there is no dimension of the unmanifest, the invisible, there will be no creativity. You are a scientist. You are always working in this field, at this level, without knowing it. Perhaps without knowing it, maybe you know this. If everything is manifest, and if there is nothing more than what is already manifested, then you are irrelevant. I am irrelevant. All philosophers are irrelevant. All artists will have to shut shop, go home. This is actually the heart of the matter. One of the reasons why there must be God awareness, and Kant of course came to this through a different angle. He said even if there is no God, we will have to invent God. But that's for a different reason, for ethical reasons. But for philosophical reasons, for spiritual reasons, I would say that the reason or the practical reason why we need to be rooted in God is that is the only way that we can stay aware of the reality of the unmanifest. പ്രത്യക്ഷമാകാത്തതിന്റെ ആ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യത്തെ പറ്റി മനുഷ്യന് ബോധമുണ്ടാകണമെങ്കിൽ ദൈവബോധം, ഈശ്വര സങ്കല്പം ഉണ്ടാകും. അത്രയും is that clear? That's the greatest service. That's also the greatest need. Now let me take up very briefly, it remains great dissatisfaction with Western science, Western worldview, Western philosophy. Particularly what he calls the Enlightenment worldview, the Enlightenment philosophy, and the product of the Enlightenment culture, or the pride of the Western of the Enlightenment culture, which is science and technology. In fact, this is something that he deals with in his address at Chicago, 1993. He says the greatest problem, the gross limitation of the Western philosophical approach and the Western scientific, secular, materialist culture, they're all of a piece, is that it insists on the unreality of the unmanifest. പ്രത്യക്ഷമാകാത്തതൊന്നും മനുഷ്യന് കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യാൻ വയ്യാത്തതൊന്നും എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ മനുഷ്യന്റെ അധികാര പരിധിയിൽ അടങ്ങി നിൽക്കാത്തതൊന്നും യാഥാർത്ഥ്യമല്ല എന്നും അതിനെ പരിഗണനയ്ക്ക് അപ്പുറത്ത് തള്ളിക്കളയണമെന്ന് നിർബന്ധിക്കുന്ന മൗഢ്യമാണ് പാശ്ചാത്യ സംസ്കാരത്തെ ഇന്ന് മരണത്തിന്റെ വക്കിൽ എത്തിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത് എന്ന് വളരെ വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് ഒരു പ്രവാചക ശബ്ദത്തിൽ അദ്ദേഹം വിളിച്ചു പറഞ്ഞു. അത് വെസ്റ്റേൺ കൾച്ചർ ഇഷ്ടപ്പെടില്ല. You cannot criticize technology in the Western culture. My book on HIV/AIDS, incidentally, my second book, it was titled Cross-Cultural Issues in HIV/AIDS. It was accepted for publication by Paternoster, England. But in the last reading, it was knocked out for this reason. But I say that the idea of interpreting the whole of the HIV/AIDS scenario only in terms of technology is an insult to non-Western cultures, the Afro-Asian cultures, because we've got other resources to handle with this issue. You cannot say the ultimate cult today is not any of the religious cults. It is the so-called scientific secular cult. You cannot say anything contrary to the main direction that this culture has taken and survived in that field. have personal experience, therefore I have to say this. The most dogmatic, the most fundamentalist thing is not religion anymore, it is science and technology, particularly technology. Now, the moment you posit, I hope we are together, huh? The moment you posit, that there is the unmanifest, and the anumana, the consciousness of the individual, and the manifest, then something emerges out of it. This is the heart of the matter. So please follow this. The sentient individual, the individual with consciousness, the individual who is singularly placed between the two, between the unmanifest and the manifest, with the unique capacity to mediate between the two, is in a very unique position. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് വേദപുസ്തകത്തിൽ ആദാമിനെ സൃഷ്ടിക്കുമ്പോൾ അവനെ മണ്ണുകൊണ്ട് മെനയുകയും അവന്റെ മൂക്കിൽ ശ്വാസം ഊതുകയും അവൻ ഒരു ജീവനുള്ള വ്യക്തിയായി മാറുകയും ചെയ്തു എന്ന് പറയും. What is the breath? Breath is a connecting principle. Breath connects man with the manifest. Breath not only connects but also separates. You see, in the spiritual domain, the two contrary functions are always acting. Even in science it is like that. You have the centripetal force, you have the centrifugal force. Then what's your problem? In day-to-day life, you travel on a road, there is a left side, there is a right side. What's your problem? If you spend a day, there is daylight and there is night. What's the problem? But when it comes to certain structures of thought, the contraries must be abolished. Unfortunately. Alright, so now let's stay with this. Where is the individual? The individual is between the two. He is in a mediatory role. The individual is in a mediatory role between the unmanifest and the manifest. Like, പ്രകടമായതും പ്രകടമല്ലാത്തതും തമ്മിലുള്ള ആ തത്വത്തിൽ ഇതിന്റെ മധ്യത്തിൽ രണ്ടിനെയും കൈകോർത്ത് പിടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നിൽക്കുന്നത് മനുഷ്യനാണ്. That is the uniqueness of human breath. Now, animals also breathe. But human breath is different because of the consciousness that goes with it. Now, for example, when I say that it connects and it separates, suppose you are sitting around a table. On both sides there are people sitting, right? What is the function of the table? Which the table is in between. But imagine some people are sitting on this side. They are talking. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ ഈ മേശയുടെ രണ്ടു വശത്തും ഇരുന്ന് പരസ്പരം സംസാരിക്കുന്ന ആളുകളെ ഒരുമിച്ച് ചേർക്കുകയും അതേസമയം മാറ്റി നിർത്തുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നതാണ് ടേബിൾ. Table as mediator connects and separates. Nothing like simple connection. Any connection without separation is untenable. Khalil Gibran, the Jordanian poet, in the wonderful book, The Prophet, there's a section on love. And he says exactly the same thing. He doesn't use the words that I'm using, but exactly the same perception about love. He says, a love which does not include the otherness of the object of love is dangerous. And when it comes to parenthood, he says the same thing. Know that your children are not yours. You can give them your love, but you cannot give them your thought, because they have a tomorrow which is not yours. Anyway. Now, if that be the case, how can you construct a reality or a structure of reality in which the unmanifest is knocked out? You understand the problem? if you knock out, if you reject, if you dismiss the unmanifest as unreal and irrelevant, then immediately the mediatory function of man, of human beings, dies out. And this is the reason, this is the root cause for the disorientation of the human in the modern world. The human predicament is pathetic in the modern world. I mean, it's not really that, as Emil Durkheim says, suicide has gone through the roof. In fact, he studies developed countries to the West, particularly focusing on Sweden, which Triveni also does. The classic work on suicide by Emil Durkheim. And he correlates the human frustration, the human bewilderment, and the emptiness that has invaded and corrupted the human predicament on account of development. They are the victims of development, Durkheim says. And he goes into elaborate examination of empirical data. One of the best researched texts on suicide ever. I think it's unrivaled even today. There's a study on suicide in Kerala undertaken by, I forget his name. It makes interesting reading. So, now I'm going to use a biblical illustration. Right?
We need some discussion later on. So.
Then I'll stop. I think I've given some kind of many more things. But very quickly, I'll connect one or two things in exactly 2 minutes, or 1 minute and 30 seconds as well. I was actually building up this to come to the heart of the theology, Triveni's theology and philosophy, which is the dream of a new humanity. And the strategy that is prescribed for the realization of the new humanity, which is the biblical goal, whether it is he who is in Christ Jesus, a new creation, etc., or the vision in the 21st chapter of Revelation, a new heaven and a new earth. So, the strategy for the realization of new humanity is the new enlightenment, as against European enlightenment. He says EE and NE. So, move on from EE to NE, the new enlightenment, the features of which are all quite easily discernible in the writings of the Metropolitan. I'm sorry I've exceeded my time, but that's the problem immanent in talking or saying anything about the Metropolitan. I'm not to blame. He's an ocean. And you've asked me to dry this ocean with a small bucket. So don't blame me at all. I'll stop here and then we'll have some time to discuss. Thank you very much.